Ever since the global pandemic, there's been a proliferation of think pieces announcing the decline of globalization. After 40-odd years of flinging open national borders and cooperating on free trade, they say, countries are moving toward protectionism, tariffs, and subsidies for industries that manufacture at home. But before we do declare globalization dead, I wanted to check in with my next guest, who says it was never as robust as it appeared, and it isn't dead now. Shannon O'Neill is the Senior Fellow for Latin American Studies at the Council on Foreign Relations and the author of a terrific new book, The Globalisation Myth: Why Regions Matter. Welcome.
Thanks for having me.
So first, you say that one of the things we never understood about globalization was that it was never quite as widespread as people thought. Describe what you mean.
Right, so we tend to think of this as all-encompassing, pervasive phenomenon around the world. But actually, when you look at the economic data, there's only about 24 countries that have seen their economies transform with globalization over these last 40 years. And in contrast, you see dozens more, 89 to be precise, that saw trade as part of their economy stay the same or even decline. So we've had a good number of countries that have de-globalized over these last 40 years. So it's not quite this phenomenon that has taken over, this juggernaut that has taken over the world.
And what you say, the real story is regionalization, not globalization. Explain what you mean.
So when you look at those countries that did open up to the world and the companies that went abroad, and we have seen internationalization. Trade has grown from $2 trillion to $32 trillion today. But when companies went abroad looking for suppliers or looking for customers, they didn't go to the other side of the world. They more often than not stayed nearby. And just to give you a piece of data, the average good that travels abroad travels 3,000 miles. That's about the distance from New York to Los Angeles. That doesn't get you to Shanghai, or it doesn't get you to Berlin. So really what you've seen is regionalization.
So when people in America talk about how everything in Walmart is made in China and the American jobs have all been lost in China, is that not an accurate picture of what's been going on for the last 2 decades?
It is part of the story, but this is where regionalization comes in. This is the pieces and parts and components that come together to make that iPhone or that refrigerator or that laptop or that piece of furniture or anything else that's moving around the world. And that's where regionalization happens. And many reasons why those jobs were lost and why we see everything in Walmart it says made in China, is really because we see very robust supply chains, lots of integration in Asia that are so competitive that they beat out supply chains from other places around the world.
So it says made in China. It was probably finally assembled in China, but there were probably 10 Asian countries that were going back and forth with these goods, and it finally all came together in China.
Exactly, right? There are pieces and parts and components that come from Vietnam, South Korea, Taiwan, Thailand, all kinds of places. The last place is China, so that's what the sign says, and that's what the trade deficit says when we look at the United States. But it's really that strength of Asian supply chains that's competing with U.S. producers and frankly, North American supply chains, which are weaker than the Asian ones.
So that's, to me, the really interesting part of your book is the world is divided into these 3 regions. Asia, which largely means East Asia, as far as I could tell, Europe, and North America. And you point out that of these 3 regions, North America does the worst. Explain why.
So North America is the least integrated of these 3. You look at trade within Europe, it's about 65%. Asia has grown to 60%. North America, it's about 40%. But it's
Explain what you mean by that 40. So if every $10
Yeah, so $4 out of every $10 is trade within the region, and the rest goes out to the rest of the world. And what we've seen in commerce is that ties to your neighbor, that integration, the trade between them, especially when it comes down to these components or parts, that really brings economic strength because you gain economies of scale, you gain specialization, you gain access to different labor markets or skills and the like, and so you can make things that are highly innovative and quality, but for cheaper prices. And that's where North America, we see some areas where this has really worked. Automotive is one. We have very deep regional supply chains and a thriving automotive industry. But many other industries, electronics or textiles or furniture and the like, we haven't seen integration. And what we've really seen is decamping for other places like Asia.
So this is one of the things that George Shultz, the former Secretary of State and Secretary of Treasury, used to always say to me, this was the greatest missed opportunity in American public policy, that we have not taken advantage of the fact that we have these two great neighbors. On the one hand, Canada, energy rich, has all kinds of commodities. On the other side, Mexico with cheaper labor, and that we should have a genuinely integrated North American economy. What stops that?
The short answer is politics. It stops a lot of this. I think, in the United States, we got used to a number of decades where we were the world's best manufacturer, the biggest manufacturer, in part because the rest of the world was on its knees after World War II. But in part, I think we tend to think still that you don't need to do this with others. And what has changed in the last 40 years is that, like it or not, manufacturing has become a team sport and the countries participate. And so the United States still trying to go it alone means that our products will be perhaps less innovative, but definitely less affordable. And so it'll be hard to sell to not just US citizens, but sell to the 7.5 billion people that live in other countries.
Do you think, when you look at your book, you're clearly making the case for stronger regionalization and kind of building of the North American economy? Do you predict that it's going to happen?
I think we're starting to see the beginnings of it. Many of the Inflation Reduction Act or the CHIPS Act, there's places that Mexico and Canada are written into the process. So I think that's a good step forward. But we are going to have to change our mindset here in the United States, that we're not looking for a bigger piece of a small pie, which is the US economy, and maybe a smaller piece of that global pie. So that really is the conversation that needs to start.
And we have started it. Shannon O'Neill, thank you so much.
Thank you so much.